twiddle it over, as you say. You just keep bending it over, and I've made that a bit too. But yeah, they're not easy, and they were very difficult to do in a rectangular wire, and to keep them level. But something like that. But we don't do that. It's not normally done in this wire test, so you don't need to do that one.
Okay, sure.
So, oh god, what have we got here? That's a very bent piece of wire, isn't it? So is that enough for you on that one?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know. I like wire bending, but I don't know if it's something that I'm going to like forever.
No.
Probably not after the wire bending test.
So do you want to do a rectangular one?
Yes, please. There's a consultant in Birmingham. You may know him actually, Mr. Turner. John Turner.
No, I haven't heard of him.
He does quite a lot of wire bending, and it was just it's nice to watch what he does. You know.
He liked doing that sort of thing.
Yeah, he would never put crimpable hooks in, or he would he would do all the wire bends himself. He would mix what do you call it, the standard edgewise brackets with tip edge brackets.
Oh yeah. So if we put I usually put the third order bend in first. I don't know, is that a bit too far to do it around there?
Third order, so that's more like a bit like torque.
Put the torque in, yeah. Now I don't know what pliers you've got to do that.
I've got torquing pliers in the bag, and
okay, so
or if there's anything. Yeah.
So there are two ways of doing this, and I never know which people like to do. So one is to put the twist in the wire first, and try and make this at right angles, so that you go like that.
Sorry, I didn't get the bit about right angle, so
this bit here needs to be at right angles
to the wire. Okay.
Because otherwise you can do it as an angle. You want to do it like that or like that. And then this one here goes in the opposite direction. So I was going to put palatal root torque in. This is an upper wire palatal root torque. So I'm going to turn this one up and get that. Now the trick to getting both of these twists to the same amount is you can watch the plier, so that the edge of the plier just comes to the gap in it there. But also when you look across the wire, both of these bits should be sort of one behind the other, more or less. Then you know you've put an equal amount of twist on each side. Now once you've got the twist in, you then start to put the torque in. You've got at this stage a lot of negative torque in the buckle segment, but no positive torque. It just sort of flips up in the air, doesn't it? But if you start nibbling the torque in round the labial segment, and this is each little bit you push up from underneath, so you start to put the torque in round the wire, and you have to keep going around every millimetre or so.
This is to get a gradual build up.
Yeah, this is getting like the end of the velodrome, so the torque gradually builds up. And the idea is that you begin to get the torque in the labial segment, as it were, and then what was all that negative torque in the buckle segments begun to disappear. Now when you put it in, you want to look at just this bit in the front here to make sure that it's even, because that means you've got the torque even for all of the teeth, so it doesn't have a sort of an up and down effect on it. So that's nearly there. And then these are not, then you've got to just flatten the wire out so that these, provided these bits are level, we need to get it to look like that. Is it more or less level? The negative torque. Yeah, that's so it just goes up, and there might be a little bit of torque left in that side. So let me just increase that.
I mean, looking at that, doing that from here, it looks really difficult.
Well, I don't know whether it is, because it's I mean, it's a bend that doesn't actually take, clinically doesn't take very long. It takes just usually a couple of minutes to put in a little bit of torque, and so you try and get both these sides to be flat, more or less flat. But you know what, it's difficult trying to visualise what it is that you're trying to do to the wire, but you're trying to make this like a cycle track, you know, an indoor cycle track, so it's flat on the sides, and then it's banked up at the very front bit there, and then it's just a question of levelling it out. You really don't want to bend the wire behind here, you shouldn't need to adjust it, because it should still be the original flat arch form.
So the 1925 steel, I suppose you could use any rectangular steel to do this sort of...
Well, I suppose in the mouth you might do it with a TMA, but in fact when we got postgrads to do the wire test with TMA, they made an awful mess of it. So we decided to keep it as the steel. So there's a relatively flat wire that, and the things that normally happen is that the you want to be able to hold the front end down on the table and have these bits flat on the table at the back. If you see what I mean?
Yep.
And that means it's all. And if you look across the wire from side to side, again, if you hold it in the middle and look across, you want to be able to see one side hiding behind the other, and that should mean that you're pretty well flat again. Now the other little trick is that the amount of torque that you want in the labial segment is usually about the amount that's on the bevel of a plier. That would give you about your 15 degrees, so if you held the wire flat on the table here, then these arms should be parallel. If you had too much, it would be up, and if you didn't have enough, it would be down.
And 15 degrees usually what you need clinically
15 to 20 degrees, or 10 to 20 degrees is probably a reasonable amount to put in to actually have an effect. So that's what you need to do, and just make sure it's flat and you've got the original arch form back at that stage. Now the next bend you need to put in is the first order bend, so if we measure up on here and we'll stick it back here somewhere, then the first order bend should be very easy, that you just bend it out and you bend it back in again. That's a molar offset.
That's the width of the beak.
Yeah, you just usually make it just a little bit. If you want a little bit of toe in, you can. That's where this bit comes back in, but that's roughly all you've got to do. And the only thing to do is to make sure it's flat in this plane so that it doesn't go up and down on each of those bends, which is very easy to do if you don't use a flat beak plier. If you used a round beak plier, then you would put some bayonet in it. So that's the offset. The other one you might be asked to do is a canine offset. So that happens back here where the canine is. That's usually a bend out and then a series of little tight nibbles to take it back in again, so that it goes round the bulge of the tooth.
Oh,
now,
I see.
The whole point of this is that the most common problem, and it's usually in the lower arch, is that the
so the curve doesn't need to go back in again.
Well, it's trying to do in the lower arch. You probably might have seen it, but you get your lower incisors quite nicely lined up with all the contact points together. But what you don't do is the canine often sits
proud
slightly behind,
behind,
so the contact point's in, and that's because it's a much thicker tooth, and it's quite, the thickness of it here is quite variable. So if it's very thick, it pushes the contact point in. Now, ordinarily that doesn't matter, but sometimes if you're trying to put a fixed retainer on the inside, then it's difficult to bend it round all these little bits. You usually find that the contact point with the 4 is okay. So it's just the contact point with the 3 that you want to adjust, and so the bend in the wire, which we normally do, is the one that comes out and then goes round the bulge of the tooth and just brings that bit out, and that bit stays still because that contact point's okay. So it normally just brings that out a little bit, and so these canine eminence bends put in to sort of level up that thing.
Is that in the part of the finishing when you're...
Usually, yeah. It's usually lower, that's the main problem, although it does happen in the upper. Now, the other sort of bend you might be asked to put in is intrusion or extrusion. And so if we put one in the middle here, between these two, and I'll put... always make sure the torque's the right way around, so that you know that that's where the roots are. So if I'll put an intrusion bend in because it'll keep the wire flat for the time being. But they're very simple in that you just go up and down and then down and then up. So you've got a little and you probably can not do more than about 3/4 of a millimetre, half to 3/4 of a millimetre, so that it goes up. Yeah, and you see, you try and everything should still be flat on the table at this stage. Yeah.
Yep.
Reasonably flat, isn't it? Yeah. And if you put, so we usually test them by just pressing on the front of the wire here, because that curve, obviously, if it's difficult to explain, but if it's got a bucket handle on it, if you can imagine a bucket handle, then if these were 2 hinges on a bucket, then this bit would rotate up. Yeah, and it's very easy. Then when you press it down on the table across the anterior bit, you'll find that this lifts up at the back. So if you just press gently on there, so you know that it's all completely flat, because this last time is going to be flat. The second order bend is now going to mess everything up. Now, second order bend, I would normally do like this. Again, keep it the right way up. You know which way the torque's working. So the roots are over here. This is up on your upper wire. So these are the roots. So this is the gingival side. Now you have to decide what it is you want to do. We're going to take a premolar at the side here, and we're going to put some tip in the root. Now if you want to tip the root medially, then imagine the root sits on top of the plier. And if you want to tip the root medially,
I wanted to go down first.
Then you turn the plier medially.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah, and if you want to tip the root distally, turn the plier distally. All right. So let's put some distal tip in this. So you hold the wire still and turn the plier.
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
And you get quite a biggish bend in there, and it looks dreadful. Now you've just got to get the wire flat again. So just before this bend, put a little